What's happening, friends? Trumpeter Bobby Spellman here to welcome you to our third episode in our series on the arranging style of Gerry Mulligan in the context of his classic Quartet from 1952, featuring Chet Baker on trumpet, Bob Whitlock on bass, and Chico Hamilton on drums. In the last two episodes, we covered his arrangement of Bernie Miller's Bernie's Tune, as well as his own composition, Line for Lions. Now we're going to do one more Gerry Mulligan arrangement in this series, his tune, Nights at the Turntable. This is a tune that I heard way back in my high school years, and I really love this tune. I love this arrangement. It's a perfect example of the way that Gerry Mulligan would use the specific voices in his quartet to outline the chord changes and to create some excitement with dissonance and counterpoint and the like. So, if you checked out the last two episodes, you're going to love this one. If you haven't checked out the last two episodes, that's fine. Check this one out, and then you can go find them in the description below. If you want more of an elaborate description of the history of the Gerry Mulligan Quartet, as well as some of the features of his writing, you can find them there. But today we're just going to dive right in and talk about Nights at the Turntable on this exciting episode of Arranging with Bob. All right, for these videos, rather than referencing the original recordings of these tunes, we have video recordings of my own quartet playing our renditions of Gerry Mulligan's arrangements of these tunes. In the last two, we were able to record those tunes over at Skull Street Studio in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And for this last one, we have recorded this particular tune right here in the studio. So I brought my quartet in. You're going to hear Tyler Burchfield on baritone saxophone, Julian Smith on the bass, and Evan Hyde on the drums, alongside myself on trumpet, playing our iteration of Nights at the Turntable. So I'm going to play that for you. I'm going to play you the melody real quick so you can get a sense for what's going on in this arrangement, and then we're going to talk about it. Here you go. 1, 2, 3. All right, once again, we're just talking about the arrangement here. We're just talking about the melody. But if you want to hear the entire performance of that tune, you can find it on my own YouTube channel in the description below. One of the things that I should mention about some of these arrangements and the way that the Gerry Mulligan Quartet would improvise is that just like the way that Gerry would use voice leading and counterpoint to fill out the sound of each of these arrangements on the melodies, both Gerry Mulligan and Chet Baker would use a sort of contrapuntal approach to voice leading in order to create accompaniment for the other musician who was improvising at any given time. And often, Gerry Mulligan would also write little phrases in the solos that could be played to sort of create a little bit of a background compositional approach to the improvisational sections. In fact, I'm going to show you that. I'm going to show you a little of that later. All right, so we're going to cover that in a later time, but let's dive into the melody here. All right, very first thing that happens in this melody, you get in the trumpet part. Now, they start off in unison. Trumpet and baritone saxophone are in unison on this C, and then as the trumpet moves up the melody, they start to distance from one another, but you get some very delightful crunches between the trumpet and the baritone saxophone. You'll notice the first thing that happens is so right away you get a major second between the trumpet and the baritone saxophone, and then you get a tritone between the melody here and the trumpet and the C sharp in the baritone saxophone line. Then trumpet jumps up to a C, and we get a very standard voicing for an A minor 7 chord where we have the third on the top in the melody and the seventh in the baritone saxophone part here on this G. Now, here we have Gerry Mulligan, while the melody stays on a C and then moves up to a D, the baritone saxophone is going to do a little contrapuntal bebop line to voice lead from the 7 of A minor 7 over to the 7 of an A flat 7 sharp 11. So we're going to talk about that. It's going to go like this. Now, just from a compositional approach, it's a cool thing that Gerry Mulligan chose to go A minor 7 to A flat 7 sharp 11 down to a G major chord. That's a clever little, we might call that a tritone substitution, substituting a D7 in a 2-5-1 to G major with a chord, a tritone away, the A flat 7 sharp 11. But you'll notice, as with some of the other voicings in these melodies, that Gerry has done a very clever thing, which is that we have the sharp 11 in the melody, and then we have the flat 7th of the dominant 7th chord in the baritone saxophone part. No third to be heard. Typically speaking, you might choose to voice this with a third somewhere in here, but once again, we've only got 3 voices in this band: trumpet, baritone saxophone, and bass, and we don't have another voice to deal with that. So our ears can hear it as an A flat 7 chord, even though the third of the chord isn't present. So that's a cool little thing he does there. Let's give it a go. We're going to do it one more time so you can hear what that sounds like. And that dissonance between these 3 notes of that chord is going to resolve delightfully down to the G major 7 chord. Now in this instance you have the trumpet playing the melody. The trumpet has, nice of the turntable, is quite a lot of repeated notes in the melody. So the very first thing that happens, you go. And then the next part of the melody, the motive that he's following, you get these repeated notes. So one of the things that Gerry Mulligan likes to do to create a little additional motion, a little additional color, and some contrast, is to have the baritone saxophone moving from one note to another, creating, let's say, arpeggios to connect the various chords, while the trumpet stays on one note. So in this case, that might sound a little something like this. Now in that instance, you can also hear the way that the baritone saxophone is moving opposite the trumpet. As the trumpet moves up from an A to a B, you have the baritone saxophone moving down from an E to a D sharp. And that creates that B7 sound. The A to the B plus the E to the D sharp gives you the sound of a B7, even though all of the notes of the B7 are not being played at one time. And that brings us then to an E minor 7 to A7. Once again, you've got a pretty conventional approach here, where you've got a G in the melody and an E in the baritone saxophone. That's going to come down to a B, to a D, which is the flat 7 of E minor 7, and that's going to resolve delightfully to the third of A7 with the A in the melody. So now you get the sound of that E minor 7 to A7, that 2-5, even though you've only got a couple of notes of the chord to be played. That counterpoint approach and the voice leading together give the sound of that motion to of the 2-5, even without all the notes in the chord. So let's take a moment and we're going to listen to that section of the A section so you can hear the way that the horns interact, and we're going to take out the rhythm section so that you can more clearly hear the counterpoint between the two horns. And it goes a little something like this. All right, this tune is another great example of the way that Gerry Mulligan will write for the bass. Sometimes the bass is in rhythmic unison with the two horns on top, and other times the bass player is playing walking bass lines as a contrast. So in this tune, we're going to add the bass back in so you can hear it. Notice the way that the bass is playing the first 4/8 notes with the trumpet and baritone saxophone, and then the rhythm in the second measure is also played in rhythmic unison, and then from then on, Bob Whitlock starts walking the bass line and we were going to start cooking. All right, so we get a little sense for that. It sounds like this. All right, now check this out. Here's where things get interesting as well. In the last 4 bars of the A section, you could expect Gerry Mulligan to continue harmonizing the melody with the baritone saxophone or creating a little contrapuntal line, but instead he chooses to put the melody in octaves with the trumpet and the baritone saxophone. So trumpet and baritone saxophone are playing the same pitches an octave apart for the last 4 bars of the A section. And that sounds like this. All right, let's do one more round of the whole A section so you can hear how all this stuff works together. And that brings us to the bridge. The beginning of the bridge, you notice a similar motif, identical motif, that you hear at the beginning of the tune. Now, once again, the harmony works a very similar way. You get a little crunch between the third in the trumpet part and the second of the chord in the baritone saxophone part. Then we get a third. Then we move up, so that's a C7 chord at the beginning of the bridge there. Sounds like this. Now we get a classic voicing for a G minor 7 chord there. We have the third in the trumpet part and the 7th in the baritone saxophone part. Then that moves down to the third of C7, E in the baritone saxophone part. Once again, classic way of voicing this chord. We have all 3 of the notes of the chord that we need. The C in the bass, the third in the baritone saxophone part, and the 7th now in the trumpet part. And then we're going to go to an F major 7 chord. Now, anybody else might have just left the E right there in the baritone saxophone part, but Gerry Mulligan's a clever guy. He's coming up with some really interesting arrangements here. So what we have is the trumpet landing on the third of the chord on an A, and baritone saxophone going up to the 9th of the chord, putting these 2 notes in seconds with one another. That adds a nice little crunch to this. And then the baritone saxophone moves away to get to the 7th of the F major 7 chord, leaving the trumpet on the third of the F major 7 chord. So if we do it from the G minor 7 just to hear it one more time, it sounds like this. That gives a little bit of motion to the melody there to have a little bit of dissonance, resolving down to the 7 and the third of the F major 7 chord. Now we move on. It's going to go to an F minor 7 chord, the 2 in a 2-5-1 to E flat major, and we have the trumpet and baritone saxophone in unison for the first bar. Now check this out. Once we get to the B flat 7 chord, we have the trumpet on the flat 7 of the chord on the A flat, and baritone saxophone is going to start on the 6 or the 13 of that chord, a G, in half steps with the A flat in the trumpet. Now that's going to create this dissonance that wants to resolve, and sure enough, Gerry Mulligan's going to do that for us. So that sounds a little something like this. That chromatic line that takes us from the E here to the E flat down to the D on an E flat major 7 chord is going to resolve to the 7th of that E flat major chord with the trumpet on the 3rd. Once again, Gerry Mulligan is voicing this in such a way so that we have the major 3rd and the major 7th and the root in the bass, covering all of the notes that we need for that E-flat major 7 chord. So once again, let's see if we can do a little demonstration of this so that you can hear it. It goes a little something like this. And then, to finish things out on the bridge, Gerry Mulligan's going to play a little response line to get us back to the A section. We're going to a G7 now. And that line's going to just outline that G7 sound, getting us back to the 1 chord at the beginning of the A section. Now, under normal circumstances, if this was just a regular old 32-bar AABA tune, you might expect that Gerry Mulligan would arrange the last A section identically to the first A section in the way that he has in previous tunes that we've covered. However, we're not just dealing with any arranger here, we're dealing with the great Gerry Mulligan. So, he decides to change some things up in the second iteration of the A section. First 4 bars of the A section on the end stay the same, but the last 4 bars, now he's harmonizing the trumpet part rather than just putting the trumpet and baritone saxophone in unison. So we get a little additional excitement from that. So you get a sense for the sound of all of this. No great surprises here. We've just got a little bit more motion, and we have a little tag that adds a little extra melody to the end of the tune. So in order to hear what he's doing there, and then he ties the whole thing up with a bow nicely at the end of the tune, I'm going to play the rest of the recording for you from the bridge all the way to the very end of the A section. And that is going to sound like this. All right, let's check out one more fun feature of Gerry Mulligan's arranging here. Is the last 3 notes of the tune. Now, we have the trumpet melody just hanging out on the 1. So, with the remaining 2 voices, Gerry Mulligan's going to create a little motion. In the baritone saxophone part, it's going to move up from an F to a G while the trumpet remains on a C. And in this case, where we would otherwise normally expect the bass player to land on the root of the chord, Gerry Mulligan's using the bass as a third and distinct voice to fill out the sound of a C major triad. So in this case, the bass is going to resolve to the third of the chord. And there we have this sound all together. We have a delightful little ending in which we have the final chord resolving with the root at the top of the melody and the third in the bass, giving us a delightful little C major triad in first inversion. All right, now that brings us to the end of the tune, but we're not done yet. I'm going to do one more thing because I think it's interesting. Gerry Mulligan would often improvise counterpoint lines, melodic lines as accompaniment to whoever's soloing. He would also write lines. Gerry Mulligan had a very compositional way of writing these things. So rather than just saying head solos, head, when you're in the improvisation, you're on your own, in order to account for the fact that there's no piano or guitar in the group, he would sometimes write these background figures that would drive the music forward and give it a little bit of accompaniment to the soloist, in this case, Chet Baker. Now, in this particular instance with Knights of the Turntable, the first soloist is going to be Gerry Mulligan, and Gerry wrote a part for Chet Baker. Not exactly sure how much of it was improvised versus how much of it was explicitly written. I think they had a pretty good kind of sense for being able to play together in that way, so maybe it was improvised. But there's one little move that he writes into the accompanimental part that he always catches. So I'm going to play you a little bit more of our rendition of this. Now, our baritone saxophonist Tyler Burchfield is playing his own solo. He's not playing Gerry Mulligan's solo, but we left in the one segment where the arrangement comes back just for one little figure so that you can hear how that works. Now, I know that that wasn't just a feature of the recording, because there are live recordings of this tune, Knights of the Turntable. There's at least one of them. And in that case, they change the arrangement a little bit, and they stretch out a little bit more. It's not the tight 3-minute tune that you would need to put on one side of a vinyl record at the time. They can stretch out a little bit, but they still use this little figure. So I just want you to hear the way that Gerry Mulligan wrote this little section as accompaniment to his own solo. It sounds a little something like this. All right, and then that brings us to the very end of the arrangement. If we fast forward through all the solos and all that other business, you can hear the way that Gerry Mulligan creates that ending there with the trumpet on the root note. And then at the very end of the tune, he simply does the same thing, but down an octave, and it works beautifully. And that will take the tune out. So I'm just going to give you the very last A section of the tune as we played it. All right, gang, and there you have it. The classic arrangement of Gerry Mulligan's Knights of the Turntable. Be sure to go check out these albums. They exist now as compilation records. These were the first albums that came out on Pacific Records. So when Pacific Records was started, it was started to put out these albums by the Gerry Mulligan Quartet. And sure enough, they did quite well in the United States and internationally, and in a way they put Gerry Mulligan on the map. They also set a certain precedent. For example, they did an arrangement of My Funny Valentine, which really set My Funny Valentine into the greater standards sort of repertoire that you'll run into. Many of Gerry Mulligan's arrangements are really spectacular. His arrangements of the standards that they were playing of the time are worth checking out. But for these videos, I wanted to discuss some more of the specifically original tunes that were written for or arranged for the Gerry Mulligan Quartet in a particular way. So, I hope you enjoyed this video series on the arranging techniques of Gerry Mulligan when writing for his classic West Coast quartet with Chet Baker, Bob Whitlock, and Chico Hamilton. If you like this video, give us a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. I'll continue to do some arranging videos. If you have any questions about this, I'd love to dive deeper into big band arranging, how to arrange a saxophone section, how to arrange a trumpet section, arranging across the sections in a big band, things of that nature. A lot of this stuff is really fun for me, and I hope it is for you too. So I hope that you got some inspiration from the approaches that Gerry Mulligan took in writing for this stuff. One more thing I'll add. If you'd like to check out the entire arrangement, you have to transcribe it for yourself, or you got to buy it from, I don't know, the Mulligan Estate or something. Unfortunately, I can't put this stuff up because it's, you know, we're talking about educational stuff here, but you'd have to get the chart specifically from the Mulligan people or whoever's got it now, whoever owns the rights to it now. I transcribed all this stuff myself so I could understand it, so you can do that as well. It's a little complicated, but it's a fun project to do. All right, gang? So, if you are looking for music lessons in trumpet, trombone, euphonium, baritone horn, all the woodwinds, piano, bass guitar, whatever you're looking for, either online or in person in the New York City area. If you're looking for lessons in jazz improvisation, in arranging, in composition, be sure to find us on our website at ridgewoodschoolofmusic.com or send us an email at ridgewoodschoolofmusic@gmail.com, and we'll be sure to set you up with a great teacher for what you're looking for. All right, gang, have a wonderful time writing arrangements and composing new pieces, and we'll catch you on the next one. See ya. Oh, one more thing. I almost forgot. If you are interested in learning more about the Gerry Mulligan Quartet, the best way to do it is to listen to the recordings. But the best way to learn about the history of the Gerry Mulligan Quartet is to check out Alan Shipton's book, The Gerry Mulligan 1950s Quartets. He talks about the history of the Gerry Mulligan Quartet, and he talks about some of the other quartets that Gerry Mulligan had through the years, including Bob Brookmeyer on valve trombone and Art Farmer on trumpet later on. He had a number of quartets. One of my favorite recordings is with Paul Desmond. So Gerry Mulligan and Paul Desmond in a pianoless quartet setting. You can check that out as well. There's many great recordings. But check out Alan Shipton's book if you want to learn more about this, because I learned a lot about the history of Gerry Mulligan's quartets from Alan Shipton. All right, gang. All right, there you have it. See you next time.
Theory with Bob.